Jacob's well looks like paradise, clear, blue, and peaceful. But what's beneath the surface has claimed lives, crushed rescues, and swallowed evidence whole. For years, divers have tried to map its deadly chambers, only to be met with shifting gravel, blacked-out visibility, and whispers of something pulling. Now, underwater drones are exposing what no human ever could. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, wait until you hear how one diver tried to drown himself on purpose just to escape the well's merciless grip. The surface beauty hides a haunting truth. They always said Jacob's well was beautiful, but they never told you it bites back. Out in Texas Hill Country near the quiet town of Wimberley, there's this crystal pool tucked into the limestone. A swimming hole, they called it. Postcard perfect, clear as glass, calm on the surface. But deep beneath, that's where things start to twist.
So the cave right here goes down about 140 feet into the ground. About a mile in. What's there?
This isn't just another swimming hole. It's a karstic artesian spring with a vertical shaft that drops nearly 30 feet before bending into a submerged labyrinth, twisting conduits that snake thousands of feet into the earth. They'll tell you that well used to erupt like a geyser, blasting water 6 feet into the air. Some folks even thought it was bottomless. The truth is, it's not bottomless, but it might as well be. Because what's hiding down there has taken more than a dozen lives. Yeah, it's pretty, but it's deadly. Like trapdoor in a meadow kind of deadly. And recently, Hays County officials had to shut it down. No swimming, no diving, nothing.
The Watershed Association in Hays County gave a tough update today revealing Jacob's Well remains closed.
The water quality? Not safe. But it's not just the bacteria or the rainfall. There's something deeper going on here. Something that's always been there, just waiting. For years, nobody could quite explain the strange stories. Shadowy movements, gear malfunctions. Divers get disoriented in the third chamber, where visibility drops to 0 and the water feels like it's breathing, like it's alive. People whisper about that place like it's got a mind of its own. And when someone tells you, the well chooses who comes back, you think it's a joke, until it's not. There's areas in here that you literally have to take a tank off to squeeze through. Then again, there's areas big enough to drive car or truck through if you could get back there. Now, with human lives on the line, experts decided to send in something that doesn't breathe. No heartbeat, no lungs, just cold metal and light. They deployed a submersible drone, loaded with high-resolution cameras, sonar, and floodlights strong enough to cut through darkness most people can't imagine. It had one job: go down and don't flinch. At first, the drone fed back beautiful footage. The well's walls curled like limestone ribbons. The light bounced off smooth rock and showed crystal water that shimmered like glass. But as the drone sank deeper, that shimmer turned into shadow. The silence got heavy. And that's when things started to feel wrong. By the time it hit the second chamber, there were signs, bits of debris, abandoned gear, personal items, all stuck in the silt, all left behind by people who never came back up. Then came the third chamber, wider, colder, darker. That's where the drone caught something on camera that shook the room full of geologists and reporters watching from the surface. A glove, floating, alone. But it wasn't just the glove. In one flicker, barely a second, there was a shape in the frame. Something drifting across the light beam, like a hand, disconnected, silent, just there. No motion, just enough to make you freeze. Was it a trick of the light? Maybe. But the faces watching the footage said otherwise. And the divers who reviewed it later? They weren't talking theories. They were talking about a memory or a warning, like the cave was sending a message. You're not supposed to be here. And that's when the tone shifted. This wasn't a curiosity project anymore. This was personal. Because in that same third chamber, they spotted something half buried in the gravel, a flash of metal from old dive gear, a kind that hadn't been sold in decades. which meant they weren't just watching the cave. They were about to stumble into a cold case. And that case had a name, so if you haven't already hit that subscribe and like button, go ahead and do that now. Because what's coming next, you won't want to miss it. Into the chamber that doesn't let go. So now they had eyes on something serious. Old gear buried in the third chamber. But the problem? That gear was pointing to something deeper. Something way worse. See, past that third chamber was where Jacob's well stopped pretending to be a swimming hole and turned into a tomb. The tunnel that led there? Divers called it the Cathedral of No Return. Yeah, it had a name. That next stretch was what people whispered about. The fourth chamber, tight walls, pitch black visibility, gravel that shifted if you so much as breathed too hard. It was the part of the cave system that had taken more lives than all the others combined. And the drone? It was heading straight into it. The operator, a guy named Mike Garfield, had years of drone experience. He was calm, locked in, and pushing the sub deeper. As the drone inched forward, its lights scanned the tunnel. And then, something gleamed. A shimmer of metal tucked under a slab of limestone. Mike paused, zoomed in. It was a diving mask. But not just any mask. This one hadn't been manufactured in over 40 years. Divers watching the feed immediately recognized it. Their voices dropped. The room fell quiet. And then someone said it. That's Kent Maupin's model. Just like that, this whole expedition turned into a recovery mission. Now the crew was dialed in. Mike kept moving the drone forward, slow and steady. Gravel crunched beneath the sub's lights, and more artifacts started showing up. An oxygen tank half buried, its label almost unreadable. Rusted, but still intact. A torn wetsuit sleeve, frozen in place like it was reaching for something. And finally, they saw it. A human form wedged between two smooth rock walls. Not a skeleton in pieces, still together, still dressed, still trapped. The wetsuit was faded, torn in places. The limbs were pinned at strange angles. And the body? Caught as if the well itself had wrapped around it and refused to let go. For a second, nobody said a word. You could hear the electric hum from the drone louder than anyone breathing. Mike's voice finally cut through the silence. We found him. On the wetsuit, a name tag barely clung to the fabric. Mud was caked over it, but under the light, the letters started to show. Kent Maupin. And just like that, they were back in 1979. That year, two divers, Kent Maupin and his friend Braz here, had decided to do what most people were too scared to even think about. Go beyond the third chamber. Kent wasn't a rookie. He was experienced, confident, and obsessed with exploring every inch of Jacob's well. Mark? Still a student, eager to learn. The two of them had bonded over risk, real risk, the kind that didn't give second chances. They showed up at Jacob's well with a group from Pasadena, camped nearby. Suited up like they were preparing for a fight. For Kent, diving into the fourth chamber was about going where no one else had gone. For Mark, it was about keeping up with someone he admired. Together, they stepped into the water, dragging heavy steel tanks behind them. No safety ropes, no backup plan, just nerve. They passed the third chamber, slipped into the narrow tunnel. That was the last time anyone saw them alive. And now, 4 decades later, Kent was still there, frozen in that same stone corridor, caught in the well's grip. But the story didn't end there. Because Mark Braz here, he never made it out either. The fatal gravel bed and a diver's brush with death. So Kent Maupin's been found, decades later, still trapped. But what about Mark Braz here? That's where things get even darker. Back in 1979, after Kent and Mark disappeared into the fourth chamber, another diver named Joe was with them, close behind but not quite in the chamber yet. And what he saw that day never left him. Joe had stayed back, watching Kent and Mark drag their steel tanks through a squeeze barely wide enough for shoulders. No safety lines, no extra lights, just faith in their own ability to come back out. Joe tried to get their attention, banged his knife against his tank. No response. He kept his dive light aimed into the tunnel, hoping they'd turn around, but they didn't. They kept moving forward like they were under some kind of spell. That's when Joe made the hardest call a diver can make. He turned back. When he surfaced, the water behind him was murky, kicked up with clouds of dirt and gravel. That happens when stones shift or someone panics. Either way, it was bad news. And deep down, Joe knew Kent and Mark weren't coming back. As night fell, the rescue call went out. The team that responded included Don Dibble and Paul Battaglia, both experienced, both prepared, but neither ready for what Jacob's well was about to throw at them. Don was an ex-Navy, tough, certified to the max. He knew how to handle tough dives, but even he hesitated at the edge of that black hole. He waited until morning, hoping daylight would help. It didn't. The next day, Don went in with Game Warden Calvin Turner. They dropped backup tanks at 25 and 75 feet, just in case. They secured safety lines. They did everything right. Then Don made his move toward the tunnel where Kent and Mark had disappeared. He pushed his head and shoulders into the gravel-filled passage. Water rushed past, kicking small rocks into his face. His air gauge read 1,100 psi, 10 minutes, give or take. Then the cave struck back. Without warning, the gravel shifted, fast, heavy. It collapsed around him like a trap closing. His arms got pinned, his chest couldn't move, and the water turned to mud. He couldn't bang on his tank, couldn't signal, couldn't see. Don wasn't diving anymore. He was buried alive. And as the seconds ticked down, he realized something terrifying. He was running out of air, fast, not just physically, but mentally. He started thinking about death, about how it might feel, about whether he should try to drink the water and get it over with. So he did. He swallowed gulps of it, trying to speed up the inevitable. But then, something unexpected happened. His body convulsed, just enough to loosen the gravel. A flicker of light returned to his vision. Through the fog, a figure appeared. Calvin. He had come back with a spare regulator and shoved it into Don's mouth. Don took a breath and lived. But his ordeal wasn't over, because when he started rising to the surface, something else went wrong. The air he had swallowed started expanding inside him. By the time he surfaced, his stomach was swollen, bloated. He looked 9 months pregnant and was in unbearable pain. They rushed him to Brooke Army Medical Center. The recompression chamber didn't help. Eventually, a doctor did x-rays and found his stomach wall had ruptured. The infection that followed nearly killed him. But Don survived. Barely. And while he healed, others kept searching for Kent and Mark. Because despite everything, the pain, the near death, the warnings, Jacob's well still wasn't done. The man who wouldn't quit, and the well that wouldn't let go. While Don Dibble was recovering in a hospital bed, stitched up and lucky to be alive, the mission didn't stop. Because Jacob's well had taken 2 young men, and not everyone was ready to let that slide. One of them was Don Broad. Don Broad wasn't new to this. He was 46, hard-headed, and had grown up near El Campo. For him, Jacob's well wasn't just a dangerous dive site. It was a challenge. Where others backed off, Broad leaned in. He didn't want to understand the well. He wanted to face it, on his terms. When Broad arrived at the site, he geared up without hesitation and dropped into the water. He went straight for the tunnel leading to the 4th chamber. And once he reached it, he noticed something strange. A light, still glowing, lost by one of the missing divers. Just past that, he saw a corridor packed with gravel. Most people see that as geology. He saw it for what it really was, a grave. He believed Kent and Mark were buried there, deep under the stone. What haunted him most wasn't just the danger. It was imagining what their last moments looked like. It was clear to Broad. They didn't get stuck because they panicked. They got stuck because they went too far. Still, he wasn't ready to let them stay there. Broad figured if they could move the gravel starting from the top down, maybe, just maybe, they could get them out. That's when the effort turned full scale. 2 days later, a flatbed truck rolled into Wimberley carrying what looked like a spaceship. It wasn't. It was a mobile recompression chamber sent in by the Schaefer Diving Company. The families had hired them, spending whatever it took to bring Kent and Mark home. Louis Schaefer himself took the first dive. When he reached the passage and saw the blocked tunnel, his voice came through the radio like thunder. "God Almighty," he said. He wasn't swearing, he was stunned. The diving team got to work fast. They ran a massive suction hose 60 feet down, pulling gravel out and dumping it into the creek. They grabbed bigger rocks by hand and stuffed them into sacks, hauling them up one by one. It was back-breaking work, dangerous and relentless. And the worst part, the well fought back. Every time they cleared a few feet, more gravel slid in. It was like the cave had a pulse, breathing in the space they cleared, erasing hours of work in seconds. Still, they pushed on. Then the money dried up. Equipment wasn't cheap. Neither was labor. And the progress? Barely visible. Some volunteers stayed out of guilt. Others stayed because they couldn't walk away. Eventually, even Senator Chet Brooks got involved, bringing in a new dive team from Brown and Root to offer a second opinion. They examined the site, reviewed everything, and came to a cold conclusion. The risk was too high. The well wasn't giving up its dead, and so, 12 days after Kent and Mark vanished, the mission ended. Not with success, but surrender. What started as recovery became acceptance. But Jacob's Well wasn't finished haunting people, because years later their story would surface again, this time through the cold lens of a drone. The well that breathes no more. So now it was official. The search ended. 2 lives gone, a mountain of gravel left untouched, and Jacob's Well once again got its way. It didn't roar anymore, but it didn't need to. It knew how to keep what it took. Back in the early 1900s, Jacob's Well was a beast, a true artesian spring powered by the Trinity Aquifer. It used to shoot water straight into the air, 6 feet high, 170 gallons a second. People said you could hear it from the row, like it was roaring. That was its prime. But things started to change. As more water was pumped from the aquifer for homes, businesses, and utilities, the pressure dropped. The spring grew quieter. And then, in the year 2000, for the first time in recorded history, Jacob's Well stopped flowing completely. It happened again in 2008. Then 2011, 2013, and most recently in 2022. Every time the silence lasted longer, and every time people wondered, was this it? A company called Aqua Texas, part of a larger group called Essential Utilities, had been pulling heavily from the aquifer, not illegally, not secretly, just doing business. But the water table couldn't keep up. The earth was holding its breath, and eventually it stopped exhaling. In 2010, Hays County decided enough was enough. They bought 50 acres surrounding the well. Then a local group, the Wimberley Valley Watershed Association, handed over 31 more. That gave the county 80 acres to protect. They named it the West Ridge Tract, put up fences, posted warnings, started conservation plans, tried to stop what felt like a slow-motion collapse. But protecting the land was one thing. Fixing what was under it? That was a whole different story. The Trinity Aquifer was like a living organism. Once it was drained, recovery took years. Decades even. Some scientists said it might never fully bounce back. Even then, Jacob's Well was still considered one of the most dangerous cave dives in the country. Not because it was the deepest, not because it was the longest, but because of the illusion. It looked easy. It wasn't. Divers still came, pulled by the stories, the beauty, the legend. They suited up. Some stayed shallow. Some went deeper. But everyone knew what was at the bottom. Or at least, They thought they did, because the well never showed everything at once, just a little at a time. That drone footage from earlier, the one that showed Kent, it went viral, shared across the world. Divers, scientists, even regular people watched it in silence, not just because of what it revealed, but because of what it didn't. Because even with all the lights and cameras and tech, there were places the drone couldn't reach, angles it couldn't see, shadows it couldn't explain. And so just like that, the questions came rushing back. How did the well even come to exist in the first place? The well that time forgot. Before Jacob's well became a viral mystery with drones and lost divers, it already had another story, an older one, like 4,000 years older. The original Jacob's well, that one's carved into the rocky hills near ancient Shechem, right outside modern-day Nablus in the West Bank. And if the name sounds familiar, it should. We're talking about Jacob, son of Isaac, grandson of Abraham, the one who wrestled an angel and walked away limping. According to tradition, this is the very well Jacob either dug himself or commissioned after buying a plot of land from the sons of Humor. Genesis chapter 33 verses 18 and 19 lays it out. He rolls into Shechem, sets up camp, and seals the deal on some land. The text doesn't mention a well directly. But let's be real, no one sets up shop in that era without a water source. So the oral tradition just filled in the gap, and over time that story stuck. Geography lines up, archaeology backs it up. Local tradition never let it go. That's how Jacob's well stayed on the map. But this place isn't just old. It's seen things. Generations of hands lowering buckets, kingdoms rising and falling, droughts that made the well go dry in summer, and sieges that turned its water into survival. And through all of it, the well just kept going, until it didn't. In 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire rolled through Samaria. They didn't just take land, they deported the Israelites and brought in new populations. This mix of cultures is where the Samaritans came from, a group with deep ties to the land and fierce spiritual traditions of their own. They didn't just inherit geography, they inherited holy ground. Fast forward to the Roman era, and the early Christians showed up. Around AD 380, the Byzantines built a church over the well, trying to preserve it, protect it, maybe even claim it. That church later got wrecked during the Samaritan revolts in the 5th and 6th centuries. Then it was rebuilt under Emperor Justinian. Then it was smashed again during Crusader times. Finally, in the late 19th century, the Greek Orthodox Church took over and built what stands there today. But even that story isn't finished. Because in 1979, something brutal happened. A Cypriot priest named Philumenos became the head of the site. He was attacked and killed, murdered at the well he was sworn to protect. At first, rumors exploded. People blamed extremists. People blamed politics. But later, investigators said it was a lone attacker suffering from severe mental illness. Still, the damage was done. The priest became a martyr. In 2009, he was canonized as a saint in the Greek Orthodox Church. His name got added to the layers of legend already tied to this place. So, what else do you think Jacob's well is really hiding? A geological anomaly, or something more intentional, more alive? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're listening. And if you want more stories that dive deep into the world's most chilling places, don't forget to subscribe. Because next time, the truth might be even darker.